So my piece of advice is probably not to give 100% at work. And I feel like that
Oh,
is that is pretty unconventional.
hi everyone. Welcome back to the Career Growth Podcast, sponsored by Capital Placement. I'm your host, Angel. So we are at a very interesting time when not everyone can say that they remember what a traditional office was like. A lot of the Gen Z workers have never been in the office 5 days a week from 9 to 5, and I am one of them. Remote working blew up back in 2021, and while not everyone is on board with the concept, it looks like many employees prefer this working model compared to a traditional one. Joining us today is Kat Nicholls, content creator, strategist, and the podcast host at Happiful, a platform that focuses on holistic wellness and aims to make your life a little bit more, well, let's say happiful. Today, we're going to dive into whether or not flexible work modules could be the future and address some of the counterpoints to this argument. Hi, Kat. It's great to have you with us today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Amazing, Kat. Could you share a bit about your career journey? How did you get to where you are today?
Absolutely. So I've always really, really loved writing. It's the one thing I've always known somehow I wanted to do in some form. So I studied media writing at university.
Mm.
After that, I kind of fell into retail and worked in clothes shops and shoe shops for a long time, doing internships on the side. Lots of
Oh,
writing for free. I'm sure if there are any writers listening, you'll probably
yeah.
be well aware of this. Um, so I did a lot of writing for free. Eventually, I decided I wanted to work in fashion and I wanted to be a fashion writer. So I got a job with a fashion website. But after kind of a year or two in the industry, I realized it wasn't quite right for me. It
Mm.
was great if you have a real passion and burning love for fashion. And I realized why I liked it. I just didn't have that real underlying passion. So I was looking for jobs elsewhere. And then Happiful came up, and they are a platform dedicated to mental health. I have personally struggled with my mental health as a teen. So I thought I
Mm.
might actually have something to bring to this conversation. And I started there 11 and a half years ago. And I've not looked back.
I love your story. To be honest, all of us have hurdles at the beginning of our careers, are we not? Because sometimes you kind of have to give it a try before you know if it suits you or not. I studied fashion management, and while I was studying, I did retail as well. And while I was working, I was like, I'm not too sure if that is my true passion. And that's why I didn't choose passion as like my first career choice. I don't know, maybe I'll go back to it one day. But yeah, I think all of us do have that experience. It's good that to see that like a really human and realistic side of your career journey. So let's talk about Happiful, the magazine and also the podcast that you host, Finding What Works. What led to the creation of this platform?
Yeah, so Happyful really started life as a different website, so a directory called Counselling Directory. And this was a
Mm.
place to search for counsellors and private therapists in your local area. It was back in 2005, so this was when kind of really the yellow pages or going to your doctors was the only way to find a therapist. And two sisters, Amy and Emma, realized they wanted to find something different and create something to make that journey a bit easier. And they created Counselling Directory, which was the first of its kind. And since then, they have grown in different professions. So they've added
Mm.
new directories to their portfolio, including life coaching, nutrition, hypnotherapy, even holistic therapies as well. And then in kind of 2016, 2017, they realized they wanted to bring all of this together under one roof, and they
Mm.
created the name Happyful. And with that came the launch of the magazine, which its aim really was to kind of showcase all of the different professions that we work with and how they can support you and bring the conversation about mental health to the forefront. And
Mm.
really, the podcast is an extension of that. So the first iteration of it was hosted by my colleague Lucy, and she founded
Mm.
it in 2019. And it was called I Am, I Have, where she interviewed a lot of different people about their mental health journeys. And then sadly, Lucy left the company, and I was kind of brought on to take over the podcast. And we decided to do a full kind of rebrand and start from scratch. And we created Finding What Works, which
Mm.
is where I sit down with usually one professional in the industry and then one person with lived experience, and we talk about a certain topic. So maybe fear, kind of eating issues, trauma, all of these different subjects. And we kind of just sit together and talk these things through. And again, with the podcast, the aim really is just to bring these conversations and these awarenesses more out into the public domain. And it's been really fun. We've only done 2 seasons so far, but I love doing it.
Oh, I'm glad. I feel like, especially the past few years, we like I think as a society we focus now a lot more on our mental health, and most of the times I'm not too sure if that was your experience as well. Like we don't talk about it, and we just kind of hide it, and we don't hear from other people's experiences, and we don't get access to like counseling and stuff like that. So having access to this information, I'm sure it had helped a lot of people who is going through similar journeys. I was listening to a previous one that you have launched, and I was like, oh, it is really good. Like there's one about trauma, and I was like, like as a first gen immigrant, it's just there are times where I really need to dive into topics like this and really look into my childhood. But yeah, for anyone who is interested, for anyone who wants to learn about this and have that insight from Kat, feel free to go and listen to sorry, what's the name of the podcast? Finding What Works. Yeah, I was like Happiful. No, I think it's the Finding What Works, and it's sponsored by Happiful. Amazing. Right. So I know on your podcast you've explored what it means for something to work for individual. How have flexible work setup impacted your views on their effectiveness based on your personal experience?
I really love this question. And I think for me, it's realizing just how different everybody is. I think with my personal experience at Happiful, to give you a little bit of background, we were one of the first kind of companies to shut down over COVID. Our CEOs, our managers, they kind of saw what was coming and they took kind of early action to send us home. And I remember at the time we all thought, this is a bit dramatic, isn't it? It's going to be fine. And then about a week later, everyone was being told to go home. So we went home, and then what we've done since then is we've downsized our office. We used to have a really big office. Now we have a smaller one, and we can kind of come in when we want. Different teams have different rules, but it's become much more flexible. And we've also looked at more flexible hours as well. And what I found is just there's such a range of wants and needs from different people in the company. Some people really crave that structure, that coming to the office, the kind of rigid hours, whereas others really love the flexibility. We love being able to work from home more, and it really depends on what kind of work you do and just individual styles. So I think from my personal experience, that says to me, honestly, the more flexible, the better, because then you can attune things to what really suits you and what works for you.
What was your biggest struggle when you first, like when the change first happened?
Yeah, so something I should probably mention is that I also head up the company's wellness initiative kind of internally. And a big thing we needed to make sure we were doing is keeping the company culture as it is, because we had a really strong company culture, and we wanted to make sure everyone still felt connected and that everyone still felt that they weren't alone, and building confidence up as well, because I've personally noticed, and I think some of my teammates probably have, is that when you're at home alone and you're struggling with something, it can be really easy to go into that spiral of self-doubt and not feel like you know what you're doing anymore. Whereas if you're in an office, you're next to someone, you can just quickly ask for a sanity check, or just say like, can you just like sense check, is this correct? Is this not correct? And you can get that instant feedback a bit easier. So a big challenge for us was how we can still create that sense of community and that we've got each other's back, even if we aren't next to each other in the office.
Yeah. Oh my God. Like I resonate with this a lot. I personally was part of the workforce that joined after the pandemic happened. So I didn't get to experience what it's like to be in the office 9 to 5, and I can never imagine myself doing it again. But I've heard a lot about from our colleagues who join us later saying that, hey, like it's hard to kind of like, if I'm walking past your desk, how do I nudge you? How do I say hi to you? Because now everything is official. on the Slack, when you send a message, when you say hi, it has to be for some reason. And that company culture part really hits me because I realize as the team grow as well, it becomes a lot harder to captivate that culture when everyone is not in the office together. We're going to talk more about this in a bit. We'll talk about this. It's very interesting to dive into. But we're going to move into our first Reddit story. It's a segment that we like to introduce on our podcast when we kind of get a few comments on Reddit. It's it's the, how do we call it, the sea of stories,
Yeah.
the ocean of stories. So our first Reddit story is flexible remote work the future? This person says, four of my friends are willing to take a pay cut to find work from home opportunities. That's the future of work. If anyone has counterpoints, I would like to hear too. What do you think? Have you seen or met anyone who is willing to take a pay cut so that they can work from home?
Probably have. And I mean, to be honest, I think I would say my partner is probably one of those people. He
Oh,
works in the gaming industry. He's a video game artist. And interestingly, quite a few of the companies in that industry are actually encouraging people to come back to the office. And a lot of them are not super local to where we are. He would have to rely on public transport. And again, pre-COVID, he was commuting to London and back every single day. And it was just part of what you did. But now we've experienced the freedom and that you can work remotely, you can get your job done. He is now
yeah.
kind of looking for not exclusively remote roles, but that is a huge thing that he's looking for. And I
Yeah.
would say he probably would quite happily take a pay cut if it meant that he could work from home. So I do think people are doing that, and they're just realizing that this is how I thrive and how I am. I think people are realizing that they're worth more. They realize that this can work for me. And actually, I want to prioritize maybe my mental health or my well-being above how much I'm getting paid at work, if it means I can work from home and thrive in that way.
That kind of leads me to the next question where we can talk more about some of the most common limitations of traditional work style that you've encountered. And you mentioned earlier that people realize that they were more, and also this flexible styles works better for them. Is there anything else that you have encountered that kind of show that there is a limitation of that traditional working 9 to 5, going to the office every day?
Absolutely. And I think a huge thing for me is accessibility for, people with disabilities, neurodiverse people who find it really difficult to come in and work in an office environment. And an office environment isn't conducive for a lot of people. It can be quite loud, it can be
Yeah.
distracting, there's often bright lights, environmental factors you can't control. And I think for some people it's incredibly difficult for them to physically and mentally come in and spend an entire day in the office. I hope my team member won't mind me sharing this, but I have a team member who is autistic, and I know even before COVID happened, she worked from home a couple of days because it was too much for her to come into the office every day. It was too overstimulating, and she did her best work at home. And now she is fully remote, and it just works really well for her. And as a team, it works, and she does her best work there. So I think that would be a key point I really wanted to raise is accessibility for, disabled people, neurodivergent people. And these are things that shouldn't have taken COVID to come up. It's been a long-standing problem.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
it sucks that it had to take that, but I hope that we have kind of learned some lessons from that and that we can take it into account moving forward.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like being able to work from home actually provide more options for employees in the company. Finding a work style that suits them better. I'm a huge introvert actually, so for me to go into the office even 3 days a week, 4 days a week, I would spend a weekend to recover because as an introvert, you spend time alone to recharge, and instead of being around people. So I find it I love being around my team, but it's something about me that I can't change, which is being an introvert and having to recharge by myself. And being able to work from home means that I don't have to recharge over the weekend or sometimes in the evenings, and I can meet more of my friends and I can be in more social gatherings and stuff like that. So I benefit a lot from it as well. And if anyone is an introvert, you probably know what I'm referring to.
Oh yeah,
That
hard relate.
recharge. Yes, that recharge phone away. Everyone thinks that I'm, they're like, "Are you okay?" And it's like you get used to it. We used to do that, so there was a period of time when we need to go into the office. Our company also went through like a remote completely, and then go into the office, and then remote, and then go into the office. So like the past 3 years, we've done a bit of both. And we had a time where we have to go in 4 days a week because they were like, let's commit to it, let's meet each other, because as the company expands, it's harder to keep that connection, especially if you don't see them. So we're like, yeah, it's a challenge, let's try. And then even our founders were like, no, I don't
Too
think they can
much.
do that. Mm-mm.
I think
4 days a week is a lot.
that's
Yeah.
a good point, though. It does help if the founders feel the same way. So, for
Yeah.
example, our founders, again, before COVID, they worked from home very often. They would kind of come into
Oh,
the office now and then. And then, so as soon as it happened, they were like, yeah, well, we work from home. Why? It kind of makes sense to let other people do it as well. So, but that is a difference. And I know not all founders and not all CEOs and
yeah.
managers feel the same.
Yeah, and we get to that in a
Yeah.
bit. So our next Reddit story is about, could a 4-day work weeks become the norm? So someone says counting down the number of days worked per week is much better than just cutting down the number of hours per week when you figure in commuting time, clothing requirements, and stuff like that. So I know that in the UK we have tried, I think last year or 2022, yes, that we had like a 6 month trial on a 4-day work week. And out of that, 89% of the company are still operating in that policy, and 51% have made that change permanently. So what is your take on doing a 4-day work week, and instead of going in on a Friday, maybe you work slightly longer on one of the days, or maybe two of the days, from Monday to Thursday?
So this is really interesting because I actually do that. So I
Oh,
work
okay.
Monday to Thursday, but I work full-time hours. So I work like an hour extra each day. So I have
Mm,
kind of 4 longer days and then a 3-day weekend. And the reason I initially did that was because I had a separate business on the side. I was a confidence coach. So no, I was building up a business on the side. And I kind of just said, like, I'm really struggling to do both. And they said,
yeah.
okay, well, how can we help? Which, first of all, how amazing is that? And rare.
Yeah.
And I said, I kind of need more time to work on the business. And I ended up taking off Fridays. And that's just kind of continued. I've actually since closed down that business, but I've gotten so used to my 4 days, and it honestly just benefits me so much having those 4 more intense days. But again, I'm an introvert like you. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I then have 3 whole days to kind of recover and recharge. But it is different for everybody. And as a company, we did do a 4-day week trial. It was
Mm,
it was a few years ago. Again, I think it was before actually the UK kind of did it.
yeah, the
And there
experimental.
was really, really mixed results in our company.
Mm,
Some people loved it, some people struggled with it. Some people found the scheduling hard to keep up with, and certain teams needed to be covering certain areas. For example, we have a customer service team, and they needed to be on the phones, and there needed to be enough of them on the phones at certain times. So we actually didn't go that way as a company. We haven't gone down the 4-day work week. We've stuck to 5 days. But there is room if you have a reason to request flexible working, you can go in. And again, I'm not the only person in the company that works 4 days. There are quite a few of
mm,
us. Some of them are parents, and
yeah.
some of them have other reasons. So yeah, when we did it, there was really mixed results. And I think ultimately it's a really great thing to try, but then you have
Mm,
to see whether or not it actually works for your business, because every business is going to have a
mm,
different need.
yeah.
And yeah, I think we found quite a nice kind of midpoint where we haven't made it universal for the whole company, but you can
Yeah.
request it if you think it's going to be helpful for you.
That's very interesting. I didn't know Happiful tried it before, because I'm curious myself. I have realized, especially when you are, I don't know, like sometimes you do have to work extra hours just because of the nature of work, and then when it becomes five days, and then working after working hours, not complaining. Sometimes, sometimes it happens, and there are some downtime, there's some, peak time for our business. But yeah, what do you think the reasons why some people find it quite hard to adapt to a 4-day week? Is it a lack of structure? Is it more for the company other than like CS team? Obviously, they will have to accommodate the customers, or what do you think
Yeah.
the reasons are?
I think it probably was both ways. I think
Mm.
something like scheduling meetings became
Yeah.
tricky because
Mm.
we didn't trial it in that the whole company would take one day off. It was kind
Mm-mm.
of different people took different days off. So if you're
Yeah.
trying to schedule a
Okay. Okay.
meeting
Got it. Yeah.
across the company and then like three out of the five people you wanted to
Okay.
talk to are not in that
That
day,
makes. Yeah, that makes
it's a
sense.
struggle. And we couldn't do the full company off on one day because again, we had customer services team needed to manage the phones. We had our engineering team that kind of needed
Mm.
to be across the week in case something went wrong with our
Yeah.
websites.
Mm.
So I think that was a huge thing, kind of the scheduling of meetings and trying to get people in and knowing, is that person off today? Are they not? When are they in?
Yeah.
And then I think personally, some people did just quite like the structure or the timings just didn't work for them if they had to work longer days. Again, if they have to go
Mm.
and do the school pickup or something, or
Mm.
it kind of interfered with their free time that they enjoyed in the evenings, it
Mm.
became a problem. So it was a real mixed bag.
Yeah, yeah, I see. I understand. Right. So moving on to our next question. I think we talked about it a little bit earlier. There's there's a diverse range of needs and preferences to be addressed in the workplace, even in a remote setting. So, in your opinion, how can companies best identify and accommodate these individual differences and create a more inclusive working environment?
This is a really difficult one, and I'd love to have the magic
Mm.
answer of this is what companies should do. But
Yeah.
I really think it's a balance of speaking to your employees, whether
Mm.
that's speaking to managers of teams to find out what could work best for those teams, individual employees, doing a survey,
Right.
getting their pulse check on it somehow, and then balancing that with what your business needs are. And I think something we've really realized is that it's impossible to please everybody all the time.
Mm.
It's very rare that you're going to find a solution that everybody in the whole company is going to be like, yep, this works great for me. Fantastic. Thanks.
Mm.
As I
Yeah.
said, the 4-day work week was kind of an example of that, where we tried something we thought, who wouldn't love this? And then some people didn't, and it didn't necessarily
Mm.
work for the company. So it's really matching those two together, kind of really listening to employees and what they want and what will help them, and balancing it with the needs of the company, and maybe going team by team, because in our
Right.
experience our teams work so differently and we have
Mm.
different needs. My team is a team of writers, so
Mm.
we working from home works really well for us because we
Yeah.
need to get our heads down and write.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas the customer service team, they love chatting to each other and they're on the phones, and it's actually quite helpful for them to be in person, so they
Mm.
make more of an effort to come into the office. So
Mm.
yeah, it's a real balance.
Yeah, I see that. Definitely see that. Like, I think because using our company as a reference, because we shift into like a fully remote working setting, and then we have like a company policy that kind of follow up with that. So we have like a work from home budget that the company gives to everyone, so that, because like when you go into the office you have a place to work, but not everyone has a place to work at home. And obviously for us, for some people it's privileged to have your own room to be
Yep.
able to do your work there, but for some they don't. So like there are policies which I think is really helpful to help them to set up a place where we recommend everyone to be in their own room, but if they can't, there's like other things that we can help them with. Whatever they need, there is a budget that we give them. They can buy a headset, they can buy new headphones, whatever they need to help them to focus at work. So I definitely feel like having a policy that kind of helps with people who are working remotely so that they can find what works best for them is really helpful. Um,
Love that
Another
idea.
thing, yeah, another thing that I found interesting is, as we were talking about it earlier, you don't get to have someone that kind of walk past your desk and say hi. Not that I've experienced it before. When I was doing an internship, though, I was working at a co-working space, so I can see my colleagues coming in and out, and we have lunch together, and we get to know each other a lot more in that way. But because I was an intern, so I didn't get to go into the adult room
Yeah.
and share the table and know what is going on. But even with that, like the communication has to happen on Slack. So there's a lot of technology requirement of the new staff if they are working remotely, isn't it? Has any of
100%.
your team member kind of encountered that struggle? Because we definitely had.
Yeah, we did. I can't remember when we got, so we use Slack in our company. And I
Oh,
can't remember, I think we did have this before COVID, but it became a whole new thing that we all had to really get used to
yeah.
over when we were working from home. And I remember putting together a guide of like Slack etiquette and like ideas and tips how to manage conversations on there, how to manage any overwhelm, because it can be really overwhelming. Sometimes we have to like, I know I personally take about half a day a month away from Slack. I shut it down so that I can do some like really deep work. We did also create a Discord server for our company, which I know is used a lot in kind of gaming industries. I think it was our
Yeah.
engineering team who were keen for it. And we did use it a few times, but we did ultimately end up going back to mostly Slack. But it was a nice way of having a place. If people did want to just chat to people, we could kind of create rooms in Discord and say, like, I'm sat in here. So something we do as part of the wellness team is every week we say, one of us will say, hey, I'm going to be in we call it the sofa room because it's something we used to have in our old office. I'm going to be in the sofa room from like 4 to 4:30. If anybody needs a chat, if anybody wants to get anything off their chest or just wants a non-work related chat, drop in and say hello. So that kind of tool has been really amazing for that. And there has been some difficulties getting people used to the technology, but our engineering team are fantastic at creating guides and things like that. But it is increasingly necessary.
Yeah. Since you created the guide, I would love to have some suggestions from you on how I can balance using Slack. One of the funniest thing that we did was that like we when people are having lunches now we actually put up we're having like I'm having lunch, it's lunch hour, so that people either don't send you a message or wait until you finish or kind of send it to you and say, I know you're having lunch, you can reply me later, here's what I need from you in like 2 hours time. And that was genuinely because when we're having lunch and when we see messages, like our colleagues just like replies to them, and I was like it's just nonstop the entire day. Like obviously in the office, people see you having lunch or not at your table, so they won't come and approach you. But working remotely has become like constantly just having messages because people don't know what you do. So one thing that we started doing is our team started to put like I'm having lunch, so you kind of know, saying, "Hey, don't reply to me. I know you love work,
Yeah.
but don't reply. I'll wait." Or like someone will wait until they finish lunch and come back and ask the questions. Other than that, like, is there any other suggestions that you have for any teams that's using Slack?
Definitely. Statuses is a huge thing. I think, as you say, saying when you're at lunch. And not only that, sometimes if you're just taking a quick break, I know,
Yeah,
again, our
true.
customer service team are really good at prompting each other to take tea breaks because their work is very intense. They're on the phone with people all the time. You know, we work for a mental health company. Sometimes they do get kind of upsetting calls and they do need some time to
True.
go away. So they will always pop a little kind of teacup status to say, like, I'm off for a break. And also if you're away for, you know, if you're going to be offline, so for example, because I work Monday to Thursday, I will pop a status in and say, you know, I'll be back on Monday. So if
Oh,
people have forgotten that I don't work Fridays,
yeah.
it will say, you know, I'm going to be back in on Monday, and they know that. And just generally boundary setting is really good. And
Right.
a lot of it comes from us in not replying straight away and kind of managing our own time with that. And it can seem really urgent, especially on Slack when it's red and there's like a number one and you're getting DMs piling up.
Yeah,
It can feel really intense, but
it's overwhelming.
it
Yeah.
can be really overwhelming. Something my manager, who's on maternity leave at the moment, said was that somebody else's urgency is not your emergency. And that's something that's really stuck with me. So just because somebody else is finding something really urgent, it's kind of not on you. It's not an emergency. It's just
Yeah.
something that you can take some time before you go back to them on. And also having, again, the kind of etiquette we put together was things like, if you've got a question for somebody, maybe asking like, hey, have you got 5 minutes to answer a question, before just kind of diving into like 3 or 4 paragraphs of a really intense question via DM for them to come back to. it just means that you can check whether or not they're available, whether or not they've got the bandwidth right now.
Yeah.
If not, maybe they'll say like, actually, I'm really stretched at the moment. Could you pop in an email, or could we grab some time tomorrow to talk it through? So asking people if they have the bandwidth to answer a question can really help. As well as taking regular Slack breaks. As I said, I try and take at least half a day off a month just to get away from it. And that's also quite nice because it proves that actually the world won't fall apart if you don't look at Slack for half a day. It's okay. I'm trying to think of, and just channel management, I guess. So I think there's a certain design in Slack. I think it's simple or something like that, where I don't have every single channel listed, only the starred ones. And I've also organized them into different areas. So there's little kind of hacks like that. I think Slack actually have some really good guidance on that, just to make it less of a, here are all of the channels and you're getting pinged for every single one. Can be a lot. Just be like, right, which channels do I actually need to be in? Which ones do I need to actually see the conversations? And feel free to leave channels, or create a channel for particularly in-depth questions. For example, we have a channel called Content Help Desk, so that if somebody has got a question for us, that whether it's within our own team or anyone else that's a bit more in depth and probably wants the whole team's opinion, if they pop it in there, we kind of know if we ever come to that channel, it's going to be quite a meaty question, and that we kind of mentally prepare ourselves to go into that channel, because we know, okay, there's going to be a bigger question, rather than having it dotted all over the place. It's nice to have it all in one place.
That's very true. Those are super, super helpful. I'll introduce that to my team as well. Amazing. So I remember we were talking about earlier about Gen Z's not going to the office as often anymore. And one thing that I've realized is we don't have a third place anymore. I think I'm not sure if you're familiar with the concept. If you are, would you like to explain to our listeners what a third play is, especially to the Gen Zs that are just coming into the workplace?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. We actually covered this on Happiful relatively recently in one of our issues. But it's essentially about a place where you're not at home and you're not at work, but you're somewhere else. And it's another place to connect with people and just be. So it could be if you are a member of like a basketball team, if you go onto the basketball courts and play with them. I know for me, the coffee shop is a third place for me, like going into a coffee shop. Our baristas know us really well, so me and my partner go in there and we have nice conversations. It could be if you're a part of a kind of hobby group, if you're a part of a book club, something like that. So that's how I would describe it. I'd be interested to hear your interpretation, though.
I was just gonna use the analogy of the coffee shop in Friends, where you get to meet your friends outside of work, but like not at home, and it's where you chat, where things happens, where the gossip and the stories happens. And obviously, because we don't go into the office anymore and working from home, sometimes I have my own like Nespresso machine. I don't go to I don't go to the coffee shop as often as well. So I feel like the only third place that I have currently is the park, which I go for mental health walks, but by myself. So it's a bit like there's definitely, I feel like there's a need for social interactions for the new workers and the younger workers in the future, which we probably need to look out for, because as much as the companies are looking to create these social interactions, but I feel like there are things that our generation really needs to put into, like, as because it's just not as easy to get as before. I definitely struggle with that for someone who's just working from home 5 days a week. Meeting my friends every now and then, I'm like, I don't have a third place. What is happening? Where can I meet new friends? Where can I hear things? Where can I know what's up, what is buzzing? So I need to put into the effort to do that.
I think that it does take effort, which is a difficult thing. I know another place for me, I was just going to say, was a Pilates class that I go to every week. And it's not like I'm good friends with anybody there, but I know the instructor. I've been going for a couple of years and we have a little chat. But as you said, it's kind of those insignificant social connection points that can just be so lovely and so needed. But if I hadn't decided to actually right, I'm not going to do Pilates video at home. I'm actually going to seek out a class so that I can have that connection.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for that, then it wouldn't have happened. So it is
Yeah.
about kind of, racking your brain for what activities do I enjoy? What hobbies do I like? How can I use that to connect with others?
Yeah, we definitely don't want to go backwards of like our social networking skills, because I felt that this year, and I was like, oh, it's time, it's time. I was really happy that we get to work from home so that I can, you know, eliminate as much social interaction as possible as an introvert. And then I was like, oh no, there's a choice I need to make, and for all the Gen Zs out there as well, you have to make a decision on whether or not to have a small community of your own, which will be super helpful, especially if you're not living with your family, which I'm not. So, a lot of people don't nowadays. Yeah, it was really helpful. Thank you, Kat.
Nice.
Um, right. So, our last Reddit story, I believe, is on what you think about this particular sentiment. And that's something that you mentioned earlier. Why are companies anti work from home? So why are company anti-work from home? I understand that some jobs highly benefit from being in person or are impossible to do at home. But it seems like companies would appreciate the cost savings of not having to pay for the electricity, maintenance, and not having people in the office. It seems like a win-win to me. Why do you think companies want to get people back to the office, like your partner's company?
Yeah, that is a really good question, and I struggle to understand the reasoning sometimes. I know for some companies they almost don't want to let go of the office space that they have, and they're like, oh, maybe they worked really hard to create something, and they're
Yeah,
afraid that, again, maybe they're afraid that the company culture is going to disappear, because it does take
yeah,
effort to continue with that when you are remote, and maybe there is a concern of losing that. I do think sometimes there is a distrust of employees and worrying that they're not going to do the job if they're at home. But I
yes,
personally think that underlines a much bigger problem than remote working. I think if you don't trust your employee to get on with the job, it shouldn't. If you need to force them to be in the office to do that, then you've got larger problems than remote working. But yeah, I don't really know, but those would be my guesses.
yeah. That actually is the next question I have for you, and we are like diving right into companies not trusting their employees and are not convinced that flexible work can actually help improve productivity, right? And they think that it kind of restricts productivity because they can't see it anymore. So, in your opinion, how do you think companies can balance the need for flexible work arrangement, but also maintain the productivity that meet their objectives?
Again, to me, flexible working allows people to work with their own energy levels and their
Yeah.
own figuring out how they work best and how they can be most productive. So,
Yeah.
for example, I know at the beginning of the week my energy levels are much higher than at the end of the week.
Yes.
I'm post 35. I struggle now with
Oh,
week
what,
longs.
really?
Oh yeah.
I cannot tell. Oh
Oh,
no.
thanks.
Oh no, no.
Oh yes.
Oh wow.
Um,
We need to know what your secret sauce is. Mm.
thanks. So, but yeah, so I am, my energy is not what it was when I was younger, and but I changed my work schedule to fit with that. So I know, right, I'm going to kind of put my meetings front end of the week. I'm going to change my workload, and with flexible working, you can do that more. You can figure out like when is the best time for me to work, when is that. So I find it really interesting when companies say that productivity is an issue with flexible working, because to my mind you can increase it when you're working from home, but I do understand there is a fear of, oh, we can't see what they're doing, maybe they're just scrolling on TikTok, maybe they're watching TV, having a nap. But then surely the proof is in the pudding in what work outcome there is. And if the work outcome isn't there, then again, that to me is a bigger question than it being about remote working. It should be like,
Yeah, yeah.
okay, why is that employee not performing or not being as productive as you believe they should be? Are they overworked? Have you actually given them too much to do? Are they not motivated anymore? Do you need to kind of engage your employees more to bring up that motivation? So
True,
it's
true.
it's really about building up that trust and identifying any problems and then kind of confronting them, but not from the remote flexible working perspective, more from okay, so why isn't this work getting done and what can we do to support you with that, rather than going straight to, right, okay, everybody come into the office.
True. I hope more companies listens to this, because it is true. If you can't trust your team, then I feel like there's something fundamentally needs to investigate here. Yeah, and it's also disheartening to employees who's been working hard to learn that just because they can't see you, it just automatically equals to you're not productive or you haven't hit the the KPIs. I think it would hurt some people's feeling, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just having the conversation, isn't it? If as you would in the office, if someone wasn't performing, it'd be kind of taking them aside and kind of figuring out what the reason is. It doesn't matter if you're at home or in the office if there's an underlying problem.
I agree. Kat, I really hope we get to talk to this a bit more, but unfortunately, this is the time that we have. We normally ask our guests to give our listeners one unconventional career advice before we end the episode. So, Kat, what is your one unconventional career advice you'd like to share with our audience?
So my piece of advice is probably not to give 100% at work. And I feel like that is that is pretty unconventional. And the reason is, I feel like when we give 100% of ourselves to work, we're not giving space or energy to anything else, to our lives outside of work, and to our personal lives. And again, I think this is something we're learning as a society, kind of post-COVID, is the importance of our well-being and our mental health, and that actually giving 100% all of the time can be really draining. It can lead to burnout. It can lead to overwhelm. And when I say like not to give 100%, that's not to like don't try your best. I think we can all try our best, but also recognize that we're human. So we're going to make mistakes. Things are going to go wrong, and that's okay. So if we can say, right, I'm giving 80% of myself to work. I'm giving it a lot. I'm trying my best, but also I'm reserving some energy for myself to, so that I can function at the weekend when I do close my laptop down. And that's something I've personally had to learn. I had COVID like 3 times when it was all happening. Yeah. I don't know how, but it happened. And one of those times it really knocked me out. I had really bad fatigue for about 6 months. And honestly, ever since, my energy levels, again, just haven't been the same. So I've had to learn, if I'm giving 100% of myself to work every single day, then I'm just absolutely exhausted. And work is great, and it can be a really important part of our identity, but it's not all of our identity. So putting energy into things outside of work, gaining some perspective, especially if you're early on in your career and you're really like trying hard to make a name for yourself in a certain industry, just recognizing, what am I outside of work? What are all the other things that I'm interested in? Again, that kind of comes back to this third space thing, having that third space and these activities that you enjoy. And yeah, I've just found that personally to be a really helpful attitude to have.
Yes, I completely agree with you. I'm slowly learning that as well. Now that I try to have a bit of hobby and like join communities outside of work, I realize it's that extra energy that you need to give. So it's good to have a bit for yourself as well and take care of yourself. Well, that is the end of our episode. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kat, and I'm sure our listeners has a lot to learn from this. If you like this episode, don't forget to give us a like and check out our show for more content like this. And we'll see you again next week. Bye!